This is going to be a different type of video. I'm going to offer a theory, some conjecture here about how Ben Johnson and the Lions are able to execute some of the trick plays or offbeat plays that they do, that they've used in the last 2 years, while still maintaining effectiveness at their more typical strategies and concepts and techniques in terms of the run game and the pass game. What I'm specifically referring to is the touchdown to Sam Laporta, where 5 different players touched the football. Actually 6 if you count Jared Goff twice in the span of 3.5 to 4 seconds, something like that. The center, the quarterback, Montgomery, Raymond back to Goff, and then the touchdown to Sam Laporta. How do they execute that in a game situation? The simple explanation is, well, they're a professional football team. They get all day to practice. Well, no, they don't. They don't get all day to practice, number one. There's agreements signed with the NFLPA about practice length, number one. Number two, you're always going to have to use your time wisely in any level of football, any level of sport. How are they able to maintain effectiveness with their typical concepts and execute them at such a high level so far through 5 weeks of 2023, despite injuries, mind you, while and still be able to install, quote, new trick plays occasionally to drop on teams at a time of their choosing to really catch them off guard in the case of the Laporta touchdown catch. While still, timing patterns that you've got, play action passes, all of the run plays, everything that they've got to manage. How is Ben Johnson able to do it so well compared to even his peers, other NFL offensive coordinators? Let me give you a theory. I think that, number one, you have to have dedicated time periods for things like this. Now, what some people do is they install a trick play, which is what this is. Then they practice the trick play 3 or 4 or 5 times to the right and to the left. I don't think he does that. I think he practices the trick play to one side, which cuts in half the amount of time you've got to dedicate to it. So that's point number one. Point number two, if you only practice it in isolation 3 times or 13 times or 23 times, yeah, the more you practice it, the better you're going to get at it, no doubt. But if you only practice it in isolation, that's not how football is played. On the previous play before this one, they had to run some type of offensive play. Well, they got a turnover here, so this is the first play they got a turnover. But you have to run some type of play. Now, this is why some coaches run trick plays the first snap of a possession, because then you're recreating the same way you did it in practice, which is in isolation without other factors involved. Does the right guard's foot hurt because of the previous play? Is Sam Laporta struggling with his fatigue because it's the middle of the fourth quarter? Is Khalif Raymond's wrist hurt because he got tackled on the play before? You have all these variables in the game that you don't have in practice. So one suspicion I have, and call it a theory, I guess, if you will, is that they practice these things in the middle of practice. We would call it sudden change, meaning we've told the team we are working on pass plays from inside the 20, and we've told them that's what the next 8 minutes is going to be about. There's some type of announcement. There's a practice schedule that the coaches have on their practice plan that they're carrying around, and they've instructed players, hey, the next 8 minutes we're working on this. And then what you do is in the middle of that time period, you suddenly announce we're going to work on this trick concept. Now, the first time you do that to groups of people, when you change it on them, oftentimes people don't respond well. Oftentimes people are surprised, caught off guard. Well, guess what? That's what's going to happen in the context of a football game. The more you do that, however, the more groups of people, football teams, get used to sudden change. And that's why we would use the phrase. And we would tell our kids normally before a practice, we would tell them there's going to be 2 sudden changes in practice where you're expecting 12 minutes of this or 14 minutes of this, and all of a sudden we drop this change on you in the middle of that time period. So we would kind of give them a heads up about, hey, there's going to be some sudden change, but also then you could say that to them before games or before an important half. You could say, hey, guess what? There's going to be some sudden change here. What you're doing is you're normalizing the situation for them. Now, I'm speaking about 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, and in some cases when I coach youth football, 10, 11, and 12-year-old kids. These are professional football players. It's the same dynamic, except it's adults talking to adults, clearly, number one. Number two, the guys you're talking to are getting paid more than you in most cases, so there's a power dynamic as well. Ben Johnson and the Lions staff, the entire staff, but specifically the offensive staff, they seem to be able to navigate the daily expectations, practicing their zone run schemes, practicing their pass protection calls, practicing their no huddle offense. They seem to be able to navigate all of the dozens of things that an NFL offensive coordinator and offensive staff and players have to work their way through on a daily basis, while also executing trick plays, trick concepts smoothly. If you know of one that hasn't been executed smoothly, please let me know. I got up super early this morning to try to record this and try to record this and a video about the Ravens offense, which was clearly not as positive. It was quite different tone than this one. But I got up early and tried to find some examples of trick plays that Ben Johnson had run that did not work. My computer was non-compliant. I couldn't find one, basically. I couldn't find one where there was a trick play in the last 2 years that didn't work, where the exchange was poor. Like the play that we showed multiple times there, the touchdown to Laporta, where 5 different actual human beings touched the football. 6, if you count the quarterback Jared Goff, twice. That is not easy to execute. I'm going to compare it to this. The school that I worked at and coached at for years was an option team. So triple option, under center. Quarterback snaps the ball, reads the defensive end to either give it to the fullback or keep it, runs around the edge, and then there's a third player in pitch relationship. So you're pitching the football from the quarterback to the pitch man. Old school option, tremendously effective. Most human beings are right-handed. Therefore, if you wanted to be able to run those option plays to your left, you had to practice the left-handed pitches. And what we would find when we would face other teams who ran some option is they would only run the option play from the left hash. Now, the hashes in high school are wider than the NFL, and I'm digressing here, so forgive me for that. I'm leading to my point with this play. What we found was teams would only run option when the ball was on the left hash because most quarterbacks are right-handed. Where we gained knowledge of this was one of the teams we faced one year they had a left-handed quarterback. And they only ran their option play to their left because the quarterback's strong hand was his left hand. He was more comfortable pitching with his left hand. What did that tell us? Back mapping said they didn't practice the right-handed pitches with him at all. So they could minimize their amount of time spent on the option concept, the option play, and only run it to their left-hand side. Getting back to my theory about Ben Johnson, I think in terms of these trick plays, he's practicing them to one side. So the pitch, the catch, the handoff between the running back and the wide receiver, or the little flip, he's only practicing in one direction on that particular concept. They probably have other trick plays that they practice to their left. Hopefully my comparison, even though it took me a while to get there, makes sense. I think he's cutting down on the amount of time, number one, that they have to dedicate to it. Number two, I think they probably do have a dedicated period once or twice a week. 8 minutes, this is all of our trick plays work. We're practicing them, focusing on them. But then I think the players know, and this is a suspicion, I have no idea. I don't know anyone who works in Detroit media. Besides, no one's going to, tell you this if they go to Lions practice. I suspect that in the middle of periods, at some point, there's a sudden change, and they ask the players to execute these things on command, probably on air the first time, but probably also with the defense not knowing that it's coming. And that's another important element here. When you have an 8-minute or 10-minute period where you're practicing your trick plays, if there is a defense out there, if there is a scout look that's providing some resistance, they know trick plays are coming. So you kind of have to do a sudden change. You kind of have to drop it on the defense, on the offense, unexpectedly, and ask them to execute it on command. Think of combat sports. I always make sports comparisons. Forgive me for digressing here. If you guys don't enjoy it, just let me know in the comment section. But those guys practice a left hook. They practice a right hook, a straight right. They practice straight right left hook. They practice double left hooks. They practice a lead straight right or a feint and then a lead straight right. So my point is that you have to practice the skills in isolation at times, and then you have to recognize the right time to utilize them and execute them on command. On command means there's some stimuli, us calling the play, and you have to respond to it, execute the play. In terms of combat sports, the stimuli is the guy's holding his lead hand low, so I'm going to throw the straight right hand. Hopefully that comparison makes sense. Anyway, my theory is that Ben Johnson is cutting down on the amount of time they have to practice by only doing those plays to one side. Number two, I think he's having time periods where they practice them in dedicated form or fashion. And number three, simulating game pressure, forcing the team to execute it unbeknownst to the defense, so it's not announced beforehand. And I guess point number four is maybe he's calling them early in possessions so the offensive players are on the sideline and they know, hey, this is sudden change 5 or whatever their call is, whatever their phrase is for it. They probably have some particular phrase for sudden change situations, and the players have to remember what sudden change 5 is versus sudden change 20. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. Appreciate you guys' time. Let me know what you think of my Ben Johnson theory in terms of how the Lions are able to maintain efficiency and execution with their typical concepts and go out and execute these trick plays like they did against the Panthers in their Week 5 win on Sunday.